Demand for EVs is leveling off, and EVs are piling up at dealerships across the country. It's one of the reasons why Ford is ramping down production of the F-150 Lightning. And what comes as a surprise to many is that Ford is also ramping up the production of the F-150 Hybrid. Here's the thing that not many people know. Hybrids are actually outselling battery electric cars here in the United States. I'm talking some 1.4 million hybrids sold in the U.S. this year. Today we're looking at why hybrids are the future, not BEVs. By the way, a lot of time and research was done to put together this video, and I really want to know what you think. So, while you're watching this, please comment below and share your thoughts. Higher prices of battery EVs, high interest rates, range anxiety, limited charging infrastructure. These are some of the major factors why demand for BEVs has been leveling off. There's also the fact that the earliest adopters of BEVs are finding it difficult to sell their used BEVs to a more hesitant consumer base that's slower to adopt new technology. And the consumers are willing to buy used BEVs seek to pay a much lower price than what BEV owners are expecting. The fact remains that consumers right now prefer hybrid vehicles over battery EVs. If you're wondering why, well, the short answer is that hybrids cost less than BEVs. At the same time, hybrids help you save on gas money compared to traditional combustion engine cars. I'll talk more about how battery EVs are losing popularity in a few minutes. But first, let me tell you about hybrids. It's funny because up until more recently, hybrids largely fell out of favor. Car makers raced to develop fully electric vehicles because those are receiving generous government incentives and praise from forward thinkers. But times have changed and hybrids are making their comeback. Believe it or not, U.S. hybrid sale vehicles have more than doubled since 2020. On top of that, hybrid sales here in the States are headed towards a 35% increase this year. Also, the number of hybrid models for sale in the U.S. market is expected to grow to 369 different models by 2026. That's more than double the 164 that were on sale here in the U.S. in 2020. Right now, hybrids control 9% of the American car market, whereas battery electric vehicles control 8%. It's for all these reasons that this past September, Ford announced plans to double up the production of the F-150 Hybrid in 2024. Ford is also lowering the price by $1,900 to make it almost equal to the gasoline version and almost 10% cheaper than the all-electric version that introduced in 2022. On top of that, Ford plans to quadruple its hybrid sales over the next 5 years and expand hybrid technology across its lineup. Ford CEO Jim Farley himself said that Ford has been surprised at the popularity of hybrid. Here's another factor to think about. You see, heavy loads sap an EV's battery and reduce the driving range. If you're towing a trailer, the F-150 Hybrid is a better option than the Lightning. For example, the F-150 Hybrid combines an electric motor with the 3.5-liter V6 engine and pumps out 430 horsepower. That puts it among the most powerful in the F-150 lineup. The 2023 model averages about 25 mpg, which has a leg over the 21 mpg you see with the conventional gas-powered F-150 with the same V6 engine. Ford has also struggled to keep up with demand for the hybrid version of the compact Maverick. Not many people know this, and even CEO Jim Farley was surprised to learn this, but the Maverick Hybrid accounts for almost 60% of the model sales. In fact, it exceeded even Ford's expectations. Flashback just a few months ago. Toyota was really feeling the heat from environmental groups who were criticizing the automaker for sticking with hybrid technology, which still relies on fossil fuel. Yet, Toyota's hybrid sales also expected to rise 7.5% this year. I'm talking more than 600,000 units. Right now, hybrids make up 1/3 of Toyota's total U.S. sales. Some of its models are only available with hybrid powertrain, like the Sienna minivan and the Sequoia full-size SUV. The Toyota Sienna has a waiting list of at least 8 months, and that's if you're fortunate. Honestly, Toyota would sell even more hybrids as a percentage of its total, especially plug-in models, if it just had more powertrains available. Toyota's U.S. sales chief, Jack Hollis, says if you look at plug-in hybrids, the market is really growing fast. He believes that Toyota can easily double its plug-in hybrid sales. Or look at Honda. Hybrids make about 20% of Honda's total sales here in the state. In fact, the kind of volume Honda is achieving with hybrids is starting to set the tone for its future EVs. Honda attributes recent hybrid success to a new dual motor system. This new system provides a boost to horsepower and fuel economy, unlike Honda's previous generation of single motor hybrids. This upward trend in hybrids isn't isolated to the U.S. alone. It's happening worldwide. So much so that global sales of hybrids are expected to be up 20% this year and grow by 71% over the next 5 years. Asia and North America will supposedly see the most growth, and Europe should see an 11% jump in hybrid sales this year. Along with an uptick in hybrids, we're seeing a downward trend in full battery electric cars. And that's ironic because many car companies up till now have been betting on BEVs and pouring a ton of investments into BEV technology. I'm talking a jaw-dropping $616 billion. But look deeper and you'll start to see a new trend. This past August 2023 took twice as long to sell a BEV here in the States as it did the previous January. By comparison, gasoline-powered cars are selling more readily. Here's the thing. Some 53% of Americans believe that BEVs are the future and will eventually replace combustion engine cars. But only 31% of car dealers agree. Most dealers don't think BEVs are the future. The simple truth is that right now, we got an oversupply of EVs compared to a leveling demand. The problem isn't lack of consumer interest or hope. The thing is, most consumers can't afford it. Or they have some sort of range anxiety, which is a fear that their EV will run out of juice and leave them stranded. Or they have other EV-related concerns that's holding them back from making a purchase. Consider, too, how the public charging infrastructure across the U.S. is still in its infancy. We're just moving a little too fast, and dealerships are struggling to catch up. Data from last summer showed that there was, on average, a 52-day supply of gas-powered vehicles at dealerships. In other words, hypothetically speaking, if all car makers suddenly stopped making traditional cars, dealerships would have enough inventory to last 52 days. By comparison, dealerships had a 57-day supply of traditional pickup trucks. Then take a look at the EV supply. Dealerships have been seeing 90 to 100-day supply of EVs. Consider also large brands like Ford and GM. BEVs accounted for just around 4 and 3% of U.S. total sales. So you can see it's a teeny tiny fraction of their sales. Funny thing is, during the middle of the pandemic, EV enthusiasm was at an all-time high. In 2021, a whopping 86% of American consumers were considering buying an EV. But fast forward 2 years later to 2023, and only 67% of Americans are even considering buying an EV. There's even a shift on the behavior of the average EV buyer. Right now, some 40% of EV shoppers are trading in a vehicle that they already own for a new one. That's about twice the volume we saw a decade ago. The thing is, the average EV that were purchased back then weren't the primary car for a house, but an extra car, which consumers with more money bought with tax credit. Factor in, too, that the second half of 2023, many automakers announced they'll move to the Tesla charging standard, which is known as the North American Charging Standard, or NACS, pronounced NAC for short. That's one simple announcement, means that EVs currently out on the lot are sitting there with the soon-to-be obsolete charging out. Some are calling it the Great NACS Migration. Ford was the first to announce the switch. They'll implement this in the F-150 Lightning, Mustang Mach-E, E-Transit, and future EVs. GM is following suit, which is interesting because the GM Ultium architecture uses 800-volt technology to allow ultra-fast charging. But Tesla superchargers currently run on 400-volt technology. So it means when GM cars make the switch, those EVs won't maximize their charging speeds. Ford foresaw that its EV division Model E will lose money this year. Turns out they're losing more money this year than originally thought. Ford originally targeted to build 400,000 EVs annually by 2023, but they're now pushing that date out to 2024. In the third quarter of the year, Ford delivered 3,503 of its electric truck, the F-150 Lightning. This was a 46% decrease from the year prior. So it's no surprise this past October, Ford said that they'll slow down production of the Lightning. Don't get me wrong, many EVs across the country saw record high sales the last several months. The problem is, it wasn't as high as car makers expected. Recently, GM said it will delay its electric pickup production at its Orion, Michigan factory. GM cited evolving EV demand as the reason. GM plans to convert its Orion plant for making the Chevy Bolt to the original Chevy Silverado and GMC Sierra in late 2025, instead of the original target date of 2024. Ford and GM aren't the only major American automaker to slow down EV production. Believe it or not, so is Tesla. Last October, Tesla said it was cautious about expanding its EV production capacity because of economic uncertainties and slowdown in demand. Elon Musk said he was worried about high borrowing costs preventing potential customers from affording Tesla's vehicles, despite substantial price cuts. One thing's for sure, consumers typically hesitate to buy a new car when there's economic uncertainty. Tesla has been the first and most aggressive EV maker to slash prices. Past August, Model 3 transaction prices were down 20% year over year. Model S prices were down 17%, and Model Ys were down 16%. And Model X prices were down 13%. After Tesla slashed its prices, other EV makers followed suit. But price isn't the only barrier to EV purchase. Some 30 to 34% of Americans rent an apartment. The average age of an American home renter is 39 years old. And almost a third of renters here in the U.S. are younger than 35. The average income of a renter is $42,500 a year. But when it comes to credit score ratings, renters typically have a fair credit score rating, whereas homeowners tend to have an excellent credit. Another thing that apartment renters have in common is their car. Logic can tell you why most apartment renters have a traditional combustion engine car or standard hybrid car that does not need recharging. Rarely will you see an apartment renter own a full battery electric car. Reason is, most apartment complexes have limited parking stalls as it is. So you'd really think they're going to invest in EV charging ports? So it's actually a huge inconvenience for an apartment renter to get a battery electric car. That's why the thought of getting an EV is nowhere near their radar. The only option for an apartment renter who really wants a BEV is to use a public charging station. Maybe he has one near his place of work, for example. But what will he do if the one charging station he's counting on is busy, or worse yet, broken? This might sound like a nightmarish worst-case scenario, but believe it or not, this has happened to multiple EV owners. Talk about limiting your already limited options. This is yet another reason why buying an EV isn't all that appealing to an apartment renter. Here's another thing about public charging. Last summer in LA, almost 25% of all new vehicle registered were plug-ins. On top of that, Los Angeles estimates that the next 2 decades it will need to expand its distribution capacity somewhere between 25 to 50%. Around 2/3 of the increased demand is coming purely from electric vehicles. Now here's where the problem starts. Public chargers just aren't being built or expanded fast enough to keep up with the increasing EV demand. Nationwide last year in 2022, there were around 120,000 public charging ports featuring level 2 charging or above. But at the same time, there were almost 1.5 million EVs registered in the US. That's around 12 cars per one charger. Of course, not all cars will be flocking to these public charging stations. Remember, some people have at-home chargers, but there's no denying we still don't have enough public chargers for everyone who needs one. There was a briefing prepared for the U.S. Department of Energy last year done by the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. It found that by 2030, there will be around 19 million EVs on our road, and we're going to need at least 9.6 million more charging stations than we currently have to charge them. I don't know about you, but almost 10 million charging stations less than 7 years sounds like a tall order. We don't have sufficient capacity as it is right now. Here's the thing. Americans are all about independence. Our first instinct and preference is comfort. The comfort of having our own home charging port. But that comes at a cost. I'm talking over $1,000. Now, going back to the average American apartment renters, they don't even have that option for home charging. They don't own the building. Even if the apartment management were to miraculously install a station, the renters would still need to share it. I can just imagine the tension between renters trying to fight over first dibs. Or imagine that one oddball who tries to string an extra long extension cord from his front door or balcony to his EV. So you can see that EV makers need to address this problem. They want to tap into this 30 to 34% of the American population. Right now, engineers are trying to find a solution for apartment renters to charge their EVs. Cities across the U.S. are trying to come up with innovative public charging solutions. Let's get back to home charging. Residential outlets are level 1 chargers. They're not very practical unless you don't drive your EV very much or you're okay plugging it overnight. Americans who like instant gratification or need to juice up faster prefer public chargers that are installed with DC fast chargers. DC fast chargers can give an EV all the juice it needs in 45 minutes or less. There's also level 2 charging, which can take several hours to fully charge an EV. Right now across the states, level 2 chargers outnumber DC fast chargers almost 4 to 1. But what we need is the opposite. Logic says cities should install more of the fast public chargers in order to service more EVs in the same hour. Sounds pretty straightforward. That is until you consider that the cost of a DC fast charging station ranges from $15,000 to $50,000. It depends on the number of charging ports and the brand. When you see that price tag, then you understand why there are fewer DC fast chargers available. One city that's taken public charging into its own creative hands is Los Angeles. LA has already installed over 500 pole-mounted EV chargers. Around 450 of them can be found on street lights and around 50 on power poles. Apparently, LA plans adding 200 more every year. Cities like New York, Charlotte, and Kansas City are also considering similar measures. Other cities across the states plan on amending building codes for electric transition. Like Portland, for example. Portland has a proposal in the works that would require 50% of parking spaces in most new apartment complexes to have an electrical conduit. And for apartment complexes with 6 or less spaces, all of them would need to be EV ready. If you were to take a look across the pond in London, you'll find that the city has over 4,000 public chargers on streetlights. Installing public chargers is a lot cheaper to do on streetlights, instead of wiring a charging station into the sidewalk. But here's the thing. Los Angeles and London have an advantage over other U.S. cities. Their streetlights operate on 240 volts, which is a lot better for EV charging. Most American city streetlights use 120 volts. As you can imagine, 120 volts takes a lot longer to charge an EV than 240 volts. Because of this, most cities have to use a mix of public charging solutions. In 2022, the Biden administration approved plans to roll out a network of high-speed chargers across interstate highways. To do so, the administration approved using $5 billion in federal funding over the next 5 years. That might sound promising, but states have to wait for an extra $2.5 billion in local grants to fill in for charging gaps first. Even if apartment complexes had charging stations on site, there's yet another factor that limits many renters from getting an EV. It'll be summed up in 2 words: rent burden, and this impacts 30% of Americans. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, a rent-burdened family is one that spends more than 30% of their household income on housing costs alone. Many rent-burdened families have difficulty in affording other necessities like food, clothing, transportation, and medical care. Sad thing is, this 30% is the highest we've seen to date. Put that in perspective, last year, some 28.5% of Americans were rent burdened. Compared that to when the housing department first started tracking back in 1999, it was only 22.5% of Americans who were rent burdened back then. So you can see it's been rising. The rent-to-income ratio is calculated by comparing the national median household income, which was $71,720 last year, with the average monthly rent, which was $1,794. Year after year, this percentage has been growing, and it doesn't show signs of stopping anytime soon. Analysts say the U.S. has actually been moving in this upward direction for decades. Since the 1970s, rent has been raising a lot faster than income in general. And when it comes to lower-income households, high rent costs have been the norm for a long time. The pandemic only made this problem worse. If you think back to 2020 and 2021, you might remember how many big cities began offering COVID rent discounts. Low-income families were flocking to areas like New York, Jersey, and Boston because it's now affordable. But then COVID restrictions got better and rents got worse. The places saw the biggest declines in rent costs 2 years ago are now seeing the biggest increases in rent. Just look at New York City, for example. In New York, the rent-to-income ratio in 2022 was a jaw-dropping 68.5%. Miami came in second as 41.6%, then Fort Lauderdale at 36.7%, and Los Angeles at 35.6%. U.S. rent prices have been soaring the past 4 years. Demand for apartments soared during the pandemic because people wanted to work remotely and wanted to relocate. This caused a hike in rent prices. The pandemic also changed the multifamily market in many ways. Families wanted bigger apartments outside the city because more people were working from home. This was a huge shift from before, and the previous trend was a decrease in apartment unit size. And today, there's another phenomenon happening in the rental market. We're seeing a construction boom for rentals. New apartment construction is reaching a historic peak, and multifamily construction is at a 50-year high. Around 1.1 million apartments are currently under construction. Last time the apartment completions passed the 400,000 unit mark was back in 1972. Many anticipate that the increase in supply may give renters some relief and an upper hand. Some economists project that the U.S. rent prices may decrease modestly this year. But here's the truth and real story. The fact is, much of the new apartment construction is happening in a few metro areas. In fact, more than 40% will be concentrated in 10 high-growth metros like Austin, Nashville, Denver, Atlanta, and New York City. So most of America won't really see this surge in apartment inventory. And it's not just that. Many of these new apartment units will be luxury apartments, which isn't something all Americans can afford. So in reality, little relief and comfort for most U.S. renters. But let's talk about the rest of Americans. I'm talking about the 65 to 70% of Americans who own a house or condominium instead of renting. Now, some 80% of those owned homes have a carport or garage. Of the families who live in those, almost 70% of American households have either 2 or 3 cars. Let's assume the family has 1 EV and a home charger, and the other 1 or 2 extra cars are traditional combustion engine ones. What do you think of the odds they'll exchange their second or third car for an EV and install yet another charger at home? Frankly, I'd say the chances are slim. Believe it or not, statistically speaking, the states with the most cars per household is Wyoming, followed by Idaho, Montana, and South Dakota. Interestingly, most of these states are among the coldest states in the U.S. We all know that cold weather can be a big problem for battery electric cars. But now you tell me, which do you prefer, hybrids or battery electric vehicles? Do you agree that hybrids are the future? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.